Welcome to Pop Goes the Law.
A podcast where pop culture meets the law. I'm Julia Beskin. I'm a partner at the law firm Quinn Emanuel, Urquhart and Sullivan. I've been a litigator in New York City for 17 years. I'm also a pop culture aficionado.
And I'm Dominic Romano, a business and entertainment lawyer based here in Manhattan. The aim of this show is to demystify the law, to rip pages from the headlines and make sense of legalese in plain English. All right, let's talk about the movie Bros.
Yes.
A bit of a disappointment at the box office, less than $5 million this past weekend.
On a $20 or $25 million budget.
Now, Billy Eichner is saying that homophobia is one of the reasons that the film is not doing well. What do you think about that?
Look, I haven't seen the movie. By all accounts, the movie is actually excellent and hilarious, and I will see it. However, I watched the trailer. The trailer was not good. It did not make me want to see the movie.
And that's probably going to impact the success. Now, it should be noted that it did very well at TIFF. It was very well received by the critics, so it's a critical darling, but it's not doing much at the box office. Though this issue of homophobia impacting the box office, if I remember, Brokeback did 178 million, Birdcage 185 million. But that was a long time ago. You would think that, if anything, the box office for a film set with gay characters would increase over time and not decrease. So is it more than just homophobia?
Well, those were from a different time, right? Like, Birdcage was 96.
That's right.
Brokeback was 2005.
More recently?
That special historic time when people went to the movies. People aren't going to the movies anymore. I mean, I didn't even go to the movies to see Top Gun. And I know that...
Wow, that's a movie that should be seen at the...
I know, exactly, which should be seen at the theater. I think Bros is going to do very well in streaming. That's probably where it belonged in the first place. It's also a romantic comedy. Nobody's seeing romantic comedies either. I mean, really, what was the last romantic comedy that did really good box office? Nothing comes to mind. I'm sure we could, think about it. But I think at the end of the day, it didn't look like a good movie, even though it's getting great reviews. The trailer sucked. It has no brand name stars. This is not the kind of movie... I don't know who ran the math on that thought they're going to make profit on a $25 million budget on that kind of film. I don't see the business case for it.
It remains to be seen, though. A lot of these films have an afterlife on streaming and distribution, right. And if they could catch fire, we'll see what happens. Right. But so far, not looking great for Bros.
Have you been following the Harry, Meghan Netflix documentary?
A little bit.
Okay.
Now, this is interesting because the subjects of documentaries don't usually get input on Final Cut or any cut, really. There might be an agreement, depending on the level of fame, not to cover certain subjects, but even that is rare. Unless we're in a situation like Last Dance, where essentially Michael Jordan decided to make a love poem to himself, which was widely well received, probably because of the timing. There was no other live content when that came out. But this is an interesting story. What do you make of it?
So one thing that really, just taking a step back, that's really interesting to me is Harry and Meghan made all these deals with Spotify, with Netflix. He's got a book deal coming out, and there's been precious little content, even though they were paid millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, correct. So, but in any event, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out from Netflix's perspective, because this is a holdover from that era, which was only a year or two ago, where they were throwing a lot of money at projects and not necessarily on the basis of, good economic sense. But in any event, what I've read, and this is what's being publicly reported, Netflix wants to release the documentary, which is about their lives. Apparently a documentary crew's been following them around for the last year, and they want to release it in late November or early December, coming off the Crown Season 5 streaming, right? Which makes a lot of sense from a promotional
royal
perspective.
Update.
Harry and Meghan, again, this is just what's being publicly reported, want the documentary recut in the wake of the Queen's death. And I don't know if that means that now that the Queen is dead, gloves are off and they can do a more controversial cut, or if for whatever reason they feel like there's things that need to be cut because now that the Queen is dead and Papa Charles is maybe not going to be placed so nice with Harry and Meghan. And maybe
you think
they
he'll be
feel like
less sympathetic towards his own son?
I do.
You do, huh?
I do.
Well, here's the thing. As an entertainment lawyer, again, getting that kind of editorial control is rare. But if you're Netflix, right, and you've sank a lot of money into these two very famous people that are pretty much one-off, there's no comparable, you might cut them a little slack, give them some editorial leeway. Why? Because you want cooperation from them on future projects, right? What a better way to make sure that keep them happy, to make sure that they stay in your fold and don't go to some other streamer or network.
It is a good point that they're one-offs, right? I don't think very highly of them personally. That being said, I will absolutely be watching this documentary. So I get it, right? They unlike Billy Eichner's Bros.
I am not.
This probably is a good economic proposition for Netflix because a lot of people will tune in just who are haters.
As a Canadian, as a fellow Canadian, I am not fascinated by the Royals, nor am I repulsed by them or anything. I have no beef with the Royals, but I will say I think The Crown is solid content for Netflix, and I think this will probably do well in the coattails of that. There's a lot of American and international fascination with the Royals in general, and particularly with this young couple who's basically standing up to tradition and convention, and a lot of people can be sympathetic with that.
So at the end of the day, do you think that they'll get anywhere near final cut, or do you think
Netflix no way will they get absolute final cut, but I expect that Netflix will make some modest concessions.
Well, that's disappointing to me because I'm a gossip hound and I want to see the most
salacious
cut. Yeah. Even though actually, to be honest, they are two very boring people. Really, the two of them.
How do we know that?
From what I can tell from the content that I've seen from their interviews and whatnot. So I don't know that their lives are going to be that interesting.
I'm sure they're on their best behavior in public.
Yeah. So it's going to be boring. The documentary is going to be boring. But that being said, I will 1,000% watch it. So we'll be interesting to see if and when it ultimately gets released.
We'll look forward to Julia Beskin's review of Meghan and Harry, a Netflix story.
And then another pop culture story that was making headlines this week, another box office bomb, Blonde. Although it's streaming, I guess it's not really a box office Blonde, but it's been a critical
disaster.
failure.
It's been a critical disaster. I can't imagine worse reviews. Reading some of the reviews and reading some of the scenes and the outrage amongst all kinds of people, really, I think they managed to offend just about everybody. I cannot bring myself to see this thing. It sounds like an absolute train wreck. I might just watch it just because. How are you feeling about it?
I haven't seen it. This is what happened. I couldn't watch it yesterday, and instead I decided to watch the new Hellraiser. So I thought that it would be more pleasant to settle in. Granted, I do love horror movies, but I just could not do it. I would rather watch, torture porn. So that probably says more about me than it does about the movie Blonde. But I haven't seen it. It looks like a drag. The reason that I do want to see it, though, is I've heard that Ana de Armas, who I think is great, I've heard wonderful. She gives an amazing performance. And that always sucks. When you've got, by all accounts, an amazing performance, an actor or actress who really gives it their all, and they're just in this crappy movie through no fault of their own. It's, by all accounts, the director's failure. Maybe it's a failure of the script. I feel badly for her because she apparently gives an amazing performance.
I do too, and I've heard that, the one redeeming quality of the film, and I do like her work, so maybe it's a reason to take a look.
It's also, it's based on the book Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates, which is sort of an imagined retelling of Marilyn Monroe's story. It's not an autobiography, so I think maybe that's where.
Well, it wouldn't be an autobiography because Monroe didn't write it.
Right.
It's not history.
Right, or it's not.
It's a bit of fiction.
Exactly. It's based on what is essentially fiction.
Historically inspired fiction.
Yeah. So
With not so much history, apparently.
right. So I think maybe there's just a disconnect in terms of what the audience was expecting. I think if you read the book Blonde, you probably wouldn't be that surprised. I believe it's a faithful adaptation of that book, but that book is has a very, so just to be a little more specific, a lot of the criticisms that I've been reading are that it's basically just one instance of abuse against Marilyn Monroe after another, and really emphasizes how she was damaged and abused, and that's not a very necessarily a fulsome picture of her life and her talent and her career. That's basically the criticism that I've read. I think if you read the book Blonde, you would probably have anticipated that the book was going to explore those themes to the exclusion of some, more positive themes. So I don't know that it's, I think the director's being honest to the source material, but
the article in Variety last week said, viewers lash out, and this is the headline, Blonde goes to #1 on Netflix. Viewers lash out, so sexist, cruel, and one of the most detestable movies ever made. And the passage that got me, let's see, they're quoting various reviewers, the New York Times. Here we go. This is a quote from Steph Harold. It depicts Marilyn being coerced into her first abortion, screaming on the table that she's changed her mind, and then she hallucinates finding a crying baby in her childhood home, which is engulfed in flames. For some inexplicable reason, the camera pans inside her vaginal canal. I don't know.
I wouldn't describe that as sexist. That just sounds like a
not
bad
sexist, but just horrific
movie.
Yeah,
it just sounds like a bad movie. It sounds
something
like a bad
you might not want to see. Yeah,
directorial choice. I'm always a bit. I don't love when movies are just. Oh, it's sexist. Okay, and how? What about it is sexist? It's not necessarily sexist. It's just it's just not a good movie.
Well, the New York Times film critic says that in light of all the indignities that Monroe had to go through in her life, she didn't have to suffer through the vulgarities of Blonde, the latest necrophiliac entertainment to exploit her. Necrophiliac entertainment.
Is that Manola Dargis?
Yeah. Maybe I might not watch this after all.
I haven't seen the movie. That's not going to stop me from opining on it or giving a review.
Well, yeah, here we go.
When has that ever stopped me? No, I'm just...
on our list of what not to see this week, what to avoid based on all the buzz.
Right.
Okay. Should we switch to the law?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Rust settles. The civil suit settles. No word yet on whether criminal charges will be brought by the state of Wyoming.
New Mexico.
Damn it.
It's an easy mistake to make. They're so similar.
I apologize to the citizens of New Mexico.
Right, to the great state. I actually love New Mexico. I was there last year.
I've never been. Is it as beautiful as they say?
It's amazing. It might be my favorite place in the United States.
Really?
It's like stunning. It's like being in a
Okay,
different
I'll have to
world.
deliver my apology in person for mistaking it for Wyoming.
They call it the land of enchantment, and it really is beautiful. And also, the people in New Mexico are A+. Everyone there is eccentric and fit and tan.
Is that on their license plate? The eccentric state, New Mexico? I'm in.
These are my people.
Yeah, I'll go to New Mexico before I watch Blonde, for sure.
So this is something that kind of blew my mind in preparing for today's episode. Do you know it was almost a year to the date that the shooting happened?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Last October, a year ago, almost.
Yeah. And so just to refresh and make sure that everyone's following what we're talking about, on the set of the movie Rust, which was being filmed in New Mexico, a gun discharged. It was being held at the time by Alec Baldwin, the actor.
And it was handed to him by an assistant AD who said it was a cold prop.
He said, apparently he yelled cold gun, which in industry parlance means a gun that's
been checked and not loaded. Instead, it had a live round, which Baldwin, tragically, although he claims he didn't fire, the FBI says it would not have discharged had it not been manually manipulated. The gun fired, struck the cinematographer, and tragically killed her.
Right, Helena Hutchins.
Helena Hutchins, a civil suit was brought by a widower and her son, a 9-year-old, for a large sum of money, and it recently settled this week.
Right. For wrongful death was the lawsuit against not just Alec Baldwin, but he was also a producer on the film, and so the production company that was producing the film was also a defendant. So this is one civil suit that settled. I'm actually surprised it took this long to settle. I don't know why it took this long to settle. I think for just litigation PR purposes. Well, let me contrast it to the following scenario. Do you remember several years ago a 2-year-old boy was snatched up by an alligator in a body of water at Disney World?
Oh, yes.
And died?
Tragic.
Okay, very tragic.
Horrible.
Yeah. Disney World settled that lawsuit in 2 weeks. Approximately. It wasn't longer than a month. That's what you do in these kind of scenarios. Now, that being said, Disney has a $350 billion market cap, or it did last time I checked. It can write a kind of check to make these problems go away.
My guess is that Alec Baldwin doesn't have that kind of cash, and neither does Rust Movie Productions LLC, most likely, the company that settled. Now, what's interesting here is part of the settlement, her widower gets executive producer credit on the film, in addition to an undisclosed, presumably a cash amount. My guess, though I have no inside knowledge, is that part of the settlement will involve some kind of back-end participation for the family on the production, which is set to resume in January 2023, now that the case is resolved.
Yeah, I think I thought that was really interesting. I noticed that as well, that was a term of the settlement. I think it's really smart. I would imagine, look, I mean, Rust Movie Productions LLC, that's going to be an entity that was created specifically for purposes of producing this movie, right? It's not
Correct.
a Disney.
It's not going to have the kind of cash.
Yeah. So I would suspect, I don't have inside knowledge here, but that a majority of the settlement proceeds would have come from insurance that the production company was holding. I don't know how much money that would be. I'm just, they've probably maxed it out, but it's not. I wouldn't imagine that it's in, it's would be tens of millions of dollars, not hundreds of millions, I suspect. So it makes sense for the family to get, some participation in the back end.
I suspect part of the delay is the insurance company sorting out who's going to make the payments, who's going to be responsible for what payment and to what extent. In any film production, there are various insurance coverages that will apply. Now, what's interesting here is, though, that settlement of the civil suit against Baldwin and the production company doesn't settle all of the civil suits. There's still outstanding suits by certain other participants, and the shadow of potential criminal prosecution continues. In fact, very recently, the government of the state of New Mexico approved another allocation to continue the potential investigation, so the actual investigation.
That's right. And in their most recent petition, so this is a petition that they're filing with the state for an allocation of additional funds. It's some hundreds of thousands of dollars that will be necessary to bring criminal charges. And they identified, the AG, the Attorney General, identified 4 potential targets and specifically noted that Alec Baldwin is a potential target of criminal charges. Now, no charges have been brought. He may or may not be criminally charged, but that's what the latest signals are from the New Mexico AG. And they've also come out and specifically said this civil settlement is not going to have any impact on whether or not we bring criminal charges, which is obvious to us as lawyers, perhaps, but for whatever reason they felt compelled to make a statement.
Right, but it's interesting first of all, a couple things to know. Why is this still happening? I mean, if we go back to The Crow, 1993, Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee's son, shot on the set, tragically dies. The investigation concludes with no evidence of wrongdoing, because the willful and wanton standard is very difficult to prove. But negligent homicide was the charge there. Wrongful death and negligence in the cover-up television series back in the 80s, 1984. An actor shot himself while playing Russian roulette with a loaded gun was supposed to be a blank. The bullet did not kill him, but it ended up driving into part of his skull. uh, which later led to his death. His mother then sued for wrongful death and negligence. Uh, Although there's no public reporting on the result, then going more recently, The Expendables 2, the movie from 2012, about 10 years ago, stuntman died while performing. On-set explosion nearby. His parents sued the co-stunt coordinator and the production company. Again, wrongful death. The takeaway seems to be from all of these is that they result mostly in civil actions, no criminal actions, because intentional wrongdoing is so difficult to prove. And as lawyers, we know that typically in criminal, wrongful death is a little different. You need some kind of mens rea or intent. What do you make of all this?
So yeah, look, I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I do know that the standard for involuntary manslaughter, which I think is what this is, it's essentially it's a negligence standard that the person, let's say here Alec Baldwin, acted without due caution and circumspection, right? Under these circumstances, I think it's really hard to argue that it was anything other than a horrible accident.
Right, but
from Alec Baldwin's perspective.
Yes, as an actor, right? You're an actor, you're following direction, but as a producer, were seasoned, experienced people hired, and were proper procedures taken? Because if the reports are true, there seems to be a lot of loose behavior going on that set. Otherwise, someone wouldn't die. I mean...
Yeah, I agree with that. But to me, that's the whole reason why there's a civil lawsuit that's been settled. And that's sort of, to my mind, the appropriate way for this. Look, it's an absolute tragedy, but a civil lawsuit is the right way for it to be resolved. It's hard for me to see how Alec Baldwin is criminally responsible. I mean, you're an actor on a set.
But he's got two roles. He's wearing two hats.
Yeah.
As a producer, right. And not just Baldwin, the rest of the producers too. It remains to be seen that this Santa Fe DA has said that nobody is above the law. They made that statement. They made that quote. And you know, these films, looking at the business proposition. The Crow was released a year after Brandon Lee's death. It grossed about $94 million. Cover Up, the television series I referred to earlier, only lasted one season. Expendables 2 was released a year after the person's death. That grossed $315 million. Rust is not a big budget, high profile movie. So whether the production will survive, certainly I think if some kind of additional state sanctions are put in place, it'll be interesting to see if it gets made.
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised to learn that apparently they intend to resume filming in January. But you mentioned those other films like The Crow and others where there were deaths of actors or stuntmen on set. All those movies ended up also getting completed and released. So there's a precedent for it. It's not a bad idea from a PR perspective to say, well, the cinematographer's family is going to benefit from how well this movie does financially. I have no idea whether or not it's going to be a good movie. I will say this, Alec Baldwin, a very fine actor.
Great actor.
A very, very fine actor. It could indeed be a good movie. I mean, I don't know, but it's, of course, been completely and utterly overshadowed. I think it's going to be hard for it to find an audience because it's very hard to watch that and like not have a heavy heart, you know?
And know what led up to it. Yeah. I mean, it should be, look, let's be clear though. When we're talking about liability here, we're not talking about liability as an actor. It's liability as one of the producers. And think of the public interest considerations too. This has been going on for decades now, right?
Yeah.
And I think if the DA wants to make a point about there no cutting corners on film sets, safety in Hollywood, or at least safety of production on sets. New Mexico is a great state for film and television production. This would certainly be the case to try that. And, you know, a high-profile criminal case with Baldwin as a defendant would make for some interesting reporting. So, hopefully for Baldwin's case it doesn't come to that, but it's a distinct possibility. Yeah. He's not out of the woods yet.
I agree with that. He's not out of the woods yet. I don't see how I was saying the AG's office, the Attorney General's office, I mean the DA. it's hard for me to see how the New Mexico district attorney can think that they're going to be able to secure a conviction for involuntary manslaughter against the producers. I mean, that's a big lift. I don't know that there's even a precedent for that. So I would be surprised, but stranger things have happened, and it sounds like
I think some individuals are being considered for
exactly.
So it's not likely to be the production company. It's likely to be
that's what I mean. The individual producers.
Yeah, and also there's a possibility of certain players on set being found liable.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. One thing that Alec Baldwin did that I think was a terrible idea at the time. And
the interview?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Do you remember this interview?
Why would you let your client all right.
Yeah.
I happen to know one of his representatives. I did not ask this question, and I'm sure that this person didn't advise Baldwin to give the interview, but why in God's name it didn't help him in any way?
Right. This was about, who was the interview with again? George
Stephanopoulos, former White House advisor to...
And it was like within weeks after the shooting took place, and
ill-advised.
So ill-advised. It was poorly received at the time, right? But ill-advised for a very simple reason, which is why I would almost never let my clients, go out and make a public statement. You're making a public statement before you know the facts, right? So he was adamant in this interview. No, I never pulled the trigger. I would never pull the trigger.
And then the FBI comes out and says that's impossible.
There's no way the weapon could have discharged
Why
if he
not
didn't
just keep your mouth shut?
Exactly.
Other than expressing sympathy.
Yes.
Okay, we agree.
We are in heated agreement.
We're in alignment on this one.
Very bad. He's liquidating his real estate holdings.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe a bigger settlement than we thought.
His place in the Hamptons.
Not all of his holdings.
His place in the Hamptons is on the market for $27 million, and it went up maybe like 2 weeks ago.
Boy, you're in the know.
I spend a lot of time on Reddit
monitoring pop culture.
And there's talk of he and his family moving to Vermont permanently, which would mean that they would also sell their Manhattan penthouse.
Getting farther away from New Mexico. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's obviously chatter that he's liquidating it
to account for part of the settlement.
Yeah. I have no idea if that's
maybe
true
that
or
insurance
not,
coverage did not cut in. This is speculation.
But also
but
the place
interesting.
is only on the market, so we'll see. We don't know. But I thought that was kind of interesting. I feel badly for him just on a human level.
Absolutely.
It's a horrible thing.
Absolutely.
There's
whether mistakes were made or not, whether they should have been made or not, I imagine it's a horrific feeling to know that you're responsible for that. If someone that he had also a good relationship with, by all accounts.
Yeah, exactly. He really
and knowing that there's a 9-year-old son involved.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Yeah, it's very traumatizing. Which is actually, even putting aside like economics and legal issues and insurance and this and that and the other, I can't imagine, again, just as a human being, stepping on that set again.
He'll be able to draw from a lot of emotional reality. And who knows, maybe that money will be reallocated towards a beautiful compound in Vermont, beautiful state of Vermont. All right. Rust.
So we'll keep following this story until next week.
Yeah, or until we get together again, and when the DA comes out with their final decision, we'll be commenting on that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thanks for joining us on Pop Goes the Law.
Pop Goes the Law.